I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Forgotten Oscar Films. And this week, we're going to be looking at a really interesting film by an interesting year of films. I'm talking about the political thriller Missing. So if you're new to the series, what I do every single week is I look at a film that was nominated for Best Picture, starting with the year 1988 and working backwards. We're on the year, of course, of 1982, indicating, not the 83 year of Oscars, but the movies that were released in 1982, that Oscar year. And I pick a Best Picture nominee that I actually have never heard of, or one that's sort of gone under the radar, and one that maybe hasn't stayed in the mainstream culture. I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of Oscar race and its history and sort of its campaign, how it's positioned at the time, and then how its legacy sort of been. I give some thoughts about the movie, watching it for the very first time, as I have for all these movies, and then also just answering the central question of why haven't we talked about it today? Why is it almost being forgotten in a lot of ways? At least compared to some of the other Best Picture nominees. So just a bit of the in terms of the history, sort of the landscape at the time. The Best Picture winner of the 1982 was Gandhi. That was sort of big historical epic. It swept the Oscars, winning a total of 8 because the Best Picture, and then 7 others. It's a movie that was always shown to me in religious and ethics courses, and even it's a big long movie. You always sort of go multiple classes. It's a movie I enjoyed. I actually really enjoyed the movie. I thought Ben Kingsley was very well done. A really interesting sort of long spanning thing of Gandhi. So I'd already seen that movie. It won Best Picture. I think it has some sort of critical staying power, even though it's sort of seen as maybe one that was undeserving. It's still one that I think still resonates and still talked about and heard of, at least. And then, of course, the one that everyone thought should have won that year was E.T. And of course, that's the classic Steven Spielberg movie I've seen. I love. It's a movie that I love to talk about sometime. I guess I talked about it early on in the Steven Spielberg Masters of Control of Chaos series. However, I didn't want to choose that one because that one is not forgotten. Sort of the Avatar of its time, except for Avatar is not remembered now. Really, that's sort of one that's completely gone away from the pop culture. So we'll see if those sequels keep it in the staying power. But the next nominee was a bit of a surprise to see it. The cult survived was considered a cult hit, but clearly got the acclaim of its time. I'm talking about Tootsie, the Dustin Hoffman movie. That's definitely a movie where I think a lot of people are huge fans of it. I've always wanted to see it, even though I haven't seen it. Sort of liberal and sort of views at the time, sort of the critical comedy at the time. But a lot of people, that's a movie that people say, oh, you've got to see it. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. There's a definite passionate fan base for Tootsie, and there's Tootsie fans out there. I've never had someone sort of sit me down and said, you need to watch this. This is an amazing movie. So I'm still sort of exploring that. And of course, Sidney Pollack, who is an acclaimed actor and director as well. And then the final film was The Verdict. This one maybe in an alternate dimension would have helped and been a sort of a great forgotten Oscar films, even though I think still got a lot of critical appreciation by Sidney Lumet, who did Dog Day Afternoon and 12 Angry Men, and an incredible filmmaker I covered really early on Masters of Control of Chaos, one that's really influenced me in a lot of ways, and someone that I definitely discovered kind of on my own and really appreciate all his movies. I think recently there's always been more of a critical appreciation. He's one of the few sort of 70s directors that gets less talked about, even though he has such an influential impact on the film itself, Serpico, whatnot. Even his last film, he was doing great films. His very last film, Before the Devil Knows You're Dead, was a fantastic sort of great crime melodrama. And the movie The Verdict is about sort of an aging alcoholic lawyer, which we've seen many times before. I covered Tender Mercies last week, but yeah, like I said, I already seen it, so I couldn't choose that one. So really, the only option for me was Missing. This year, and then there's one other year that I may actually skip, just because there's just all the movies I've either heard of, I've either heard of, or sort of had some staying cultural knowledge or whatnot, but for Missing, I felt like, okay, that's a perfect one. That's one that, in a year of great movies, and a year of movies that I kind of remembered, people chose the E.T.s and the Tootsies and the whatnots, but sort of maybe forgot the Missings of the world. And this is a film that, it's still not completely forgotten. It has a Criterion, which at the time probably was seen as a movie that's kind of forgotten and it's now brought back, but it's a great Criterion Collection movie. It's done by Kostas Gravas, who is an acclaimed director who did other sort of political type movies. He's now a director that's sort of forgotten, but still he's a director that's for film buffs and for film fans, and it's the Criterion is it's a little bit more exclusive than say something like E.T., which is enjoyed and sort of known by so many other people. And personally, actually, I've never even heard of this movie going into it, so I know a little bit about it, but really went blind, and I think that's sort of a good way to go into it. If you don't know, the movie is about this journalist, I guess you would say, journalist writer who is living in Chile, even though it's not sort of named in the film. That's what it's very heavily implied, and it's based on a memoir of the same name, where this man is sort of covering this right-wing government, very sort of fascist dictatorship government. And then he gets kidnapped, and it's the job of his wife and his father to try to find him and really work with the U.S. government. But as the film progresses, we start to wonder, why isn't the U.S. government helping as much as they can? Why is there such a divide? And that's really the conflict between Jack Lemmon's character and the SpaceX character. And Jack Lemmon's character is a Christian scientist. He sort of believes in the sort of American way, and didn't really like his son going over to Chile and having these radical sort of left-wing views. And then his daughter-in-law, who he doesn't really approve of, and there's sort of a conflict there. So there's a political sort of divide between the two, because of course the wife has sort of similar left-wing, they arguably sort of radical views. Similarly, even Jack Lemmon's character doesn't like when she swears. He's very much sort of that Christian. He's a Christian scientist, but he's very much a sort of a conservative kind of Christian, in a typical sort of embodiment in a lot of ways. And it comes at an interesting point, because the film plays you in a really interesting way, because at the beginning, Sissy Spacek's character doesn't seem very helpful. Jack Lemmon's character tries to get the U.S. Involved, and sort of the embassy involved, and she's had already been doing this for 2 weeks. So by the time this has happened, and she's not really getting any results, and they always say with the first 24 hours is the most important in any case involving a missing person. So when she's been there for 2 weeks, she's sort of what's the word? Agitated and just over it, because she doesn't really think that the U.S. government's helping, and Jack Lemmon's trying to get all the help he gets. But really, I really enjoyed about this film is the questions it asks you, or at least asks for me, in certain sequences. There's one sequence in particular that I loved, just the concept in general that there's this dictatorship, there's tanks and soldiers running through the streets all the time, there's dead bodies on the street that Kostas Gravas often sort of pans to, similar sort of Children of Man-esque style. And then there's the most interesting aspect to it, I think, as well, which is curfew, where you can't go outside or else you're going to get shot at a certain time. And there's this really tense scene, and we see this sort of shadowed in between, but there's a really great one with Sissy Spacek's character, where she actually gets caught out in curfew, and she can't get any taxis because the taxis are all going because they have to get out of curfew or else they're going to die. So she's sort of abandoned on the street by herself because she misses her bus, and it's dark at night, and it's a long sequence. She's sort of going along corners, and the camera's very much sort of appearing kind of POV-esque almost, very tense sort of camera movements, and then she ends up going in sort of an alleyway and sleeping there. But there's sort of tense moments. She sees someone else. It's really a beautifully shot sequence, because it sort of really captures the tension in the air of the sort of political divide at the time. There's sort of rebellion, but clearly, the government can just take you whenever they want, and that's sort of the life they're living. And that's a really interesting sequence, but also the sort of questions it asks you, because not only is this a thrilling movie, it's also a political movie as well. So it answers some questions, because as we start to realize that, why isn't the government helping as much? What is their part in sort of these international relations? You question, how much is the U.S. government involved? Are they involved at all with this leadership, this government's leadership? That's the thing that's sort of been more modern day today in a lot of ways, but sort of starting to creep up in Cuba and these sort of Latin American countries at the time with Kennedy and whatnot, if you know things, certain basic things about American history. And of course now, today, the states are in everywhere. They have set up historically sort of false, leaderships that they can control. In a lot of ways, this film almost paints it as are they involved, and how much should they be involved, and is that even the right question to ask? Because there's certain times where you don't want to be involved at all because that's their country, and it's just a cultural difference. You don't have to sort of impose your way and your views and different countries because they operate differently, they have different customs, they have different backgrounds, and they respond to different things differently. Democracy theoretically should work everywhere, but some countries are just not at that stage yet. They still need to sort of figure things out, and the culture still needs to shift. It's a long-standing thing. So is imposing your views the right question? But then when does it cross the line? Is a dictatorship where there's murdering people in the streets? Is that the line? Or is it something, that's sort of an obvious one where, yes, that's a human rights violation, we should intervene. But then some people say, that's not our business at all. Why are we worrying about other people and other countries' problems in sort of Venezuela, which is sort of a modern day example, when there's still, so many homeless people in the States, and there's so many issues sort of wrong in their own country, but they're worried about other countries. It's a fascinating sort of a modern day post-World War II, post sort of Cold War aspect that I think Kostas Kravas really understands at this time, and inspires so many to come. I had some sort of problems. I felt Sissy Spacek did a great job with her character, making her likable, even though sometimes they really try to make her unlikable, and it kind of gets you on your nerves a bit, so you can't fully forgive her in a lot of ways. And Jack Lemmon's character, who has both performances are really pitch perfect. Jack Lemmon has this great sort of moment of realization in the film when he has a breakthrough in the case, and just a heartbreaking scene, really. And there's some great scenes in the stadium, and the camera work really is quite beautiful in this unique setting, but also sort of the visual, sort of metaphorical, symbolic representations that are littered throughout the film. Some are subtle, some are less so. That I really appreciate, and gravitates towards. It's a tense, thrilling movie that answers, asks the right questions, and kind of answers them, gives you your own take, but still leaves it sort of relatively objective. That being said, it's not an objective movie. I do want to state that the U.S. government and the Chilean government have sort of come out and denied the sort of events and sort of the depiction and sort of the bumblingness of the sort of U.S. embassy, and sort of how they didn't help as much and whatnot. So it's very much a fictionalized kind of false movie, but even though it's based on these events, it's very sort of political. It's very sort of one-sided, and not very worried about the sort of U.S. government side. And it's easy to blame a sort of big overarching person and sort of and group and body. That being said, I still think that it asks some questions that I found thought-provoking, and that for me was enough. But why isn't this held up today? That's sort of the central question we're asking. And I don't know, this was a film that I still think that, got Criterion, some people still talk about it. I actually never heard of it, but as I was doing my research, it's a film that hasn't necessarily gone away, relatively established director, so if you're a film fan and sort of more of an advanced film fan, or, not advanced or film buff and really into it, would probably be my specifications, you'd find Kostas Kravas and his filmography and stumble upon missing it and probably really enjoy it, where you're going through the Criterion collection or whatnot. But also how the political thrillers today, in a lot of ways, politics is hard to do in terms of staying in modern day times. We've talked about this before, because this is a political issue in the 80s that was very prevalent, but nowadays you have to get that context, and it sort of loses some of its effect, because you have to understand a little bit about the time and understand it. So just by having it in a political sort of time, it's politically relevant at the time, but it may not be as politically relevant today, because it's more of an obscure sort of moment in American history, and that's for me, I'm not an American, so I read into that. I wasn't taught that in school, so there's sort of a barrier in a lot of ways that maybe have resisted people. I also thought an interesting way of sort of the political thriller, and sort of that has almost become like an action thriller, and that spawns sort of different people. There's the lawyer movies in the 90s, which you can count. And there's movies like The Manchurian Candidate, In the Line of Fire, but who do those start? They start Clint Eastwood, they start Denzel Washington. Jack Lemmon at the time didn't become an action star. I mean, nowadays you star in an action thriller like Liam Neeson, and he's 60 years old, and he's being in all these action movies. Tom Cruise is still, he's 55 or whatever, and he's still being in all these action movies, still doing a great job, but that's kind of the route to them. They become action thrillers, and then they become action stars. Whereas these political thrillers, Mission could be sort of positioned as the Argo of the time. If this was the political thriller, Gandhi was the epic, sci-fi was E.T., critical comedy was Tootsie, intimate character drama was The Verdict. And this is sort of the political thriller. This was the Argo of the time. And what happened to Ben Affleck with Argo? He became Batman. I mean, there's a certain route for some of these people, even these prestige films, where I think Jack Lemmon sort of didn't fall into that. I think he was maybe even too old. He started to go into sort of the grumpy old men territory. He didn't really become an action star in a lot of ways, and he's not sort of positioned to be an action star. This is a singular moment that's sort of political in a lot of ways, a beautiful film, a very interesting film, a great drama, a tense drama, with some really beautiful cinematography, great Vangelis score, and just sort of what it says and what it makes you think about in terms of its themes and its message. I thought was very well done. I enjoyed missing quite a bit. That being said, still go into it with it, don't go with, I don't. It's still sort of a manipulative movie in a lot of ways. You have to realize that this was my only sort of context of this period, and then I read more about it. I think that's always a viewer's sort of responsibility. That it's still a movie. You can't just watch it and be like, I'm convinced. You can't watch a documentary and that says the Earth is flat and be like, I'm convinced the Earth is flat. You have to do more research. Movies can be manipulative in a lot of ways, especially something like a documentary and something like this that's based on real events. Even though it's based on real events, we weren't there. We don't have the other sort of perspective, the other side, and we do have to sort of do our own independent research if we want to understand it more. But as a film, a piece of entertainment, a piece of art, I still think that it's well done and something that I enjoyed quite a bit. That's about it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Let me know in the comments down below. Should E.T. have won? What are some of your other favorite movies of 1982? And should I see Tootsie next week? Should be a fun one. I believe that one's Red, sort of 3-hour epic, which should be a really fun episode. I'm really looking forward to filming that one. That's about it, guys. I hope you guys. Oh, and next week you will be seeing me in a different sort of setting. I'm moving out of this place, going back to my parents' place for a bit. That's about it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. And until next time, stay tuned.